Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
The tooth is the only part of a body that cannot heal itself, which presumably excludes your head exploding. Welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Cavity Caleb, and today we have more weird news than usual, so I'll try to rush my way through it. And in a vain attempt to raise the bar for this show, I'm going to start off with the happier stories of the week. But it should be noted that they're happier stories as read by my sick brain. So that includes the New York town of Swastika voting to keep its name, as well as New York's Transit Authority finally banning defecation on public transit. That one's been a long time coming. After a few dandy old animal stories, we will get to the sadder weird news of the week, which includes a naked shootout and a Instagram model who dresses as Catwoman who got caught as a masked robber. Goodness gracious. Then we will get to the tragic stories of the week, which include a man dying from eating too much licorice, and a lady's remains who were sent to the wrong address. If you couldn't tell already, this is the weirdest of the weird news that is available, and there will be a bevy of Florida stories of the week. Finally, in our final segment, we will do my top 10 secret societies. Illuminati, Freemasons, all your favorites. So we'll get to that, but we are going to start with a man from India who accidentally swallowed his own toothbrush while brushing his teeth. So doctors in the Pradesh Pasighat area, which is in India, removed the toothbrush from a man's stomach, fearing that delay of the surgery could have killed the patient within 24 hours of the swallowing incident. Now, if you've yourself swallowed a toothbrush, don't worry about it. You can get surgery that only takes about 30 to 35 minutes, which will remove the long stick of plastic from your stomach. The 39-year-old man said that he was trying to clean the tooth cavities when the brush slipped off of his hand and he swallowed it. I think somebody needs to tell this man that his cavities are not 3 inches deep down his throat. Nah, I feel bad for the guy. Because if you think about it, how many people get a news story written about them? Not very many, so this will probably be the only one he gets. So his only claim to fame, his 15 minutes of fame, as Andy Warhol would say, is not exactly inspiration-worthy. But that's not even the most embarrassing part. The embarrassing part is that it was his family members who rushed him to the local clinic, which then referred him to a general hospital where doctors conducted an x-ray. But, of course, they could not locate the toothbrush in the man's body because, I can't imagine x-rays are specifically terrific at locating plastic. Nevertheless, when this young gentleman was being radiated by the doctors, another surgeon walked in and said that the brush must have entered the stomach, which suggests that the patient should be admitted to a hospital for a laboratory test. It should be noted that this wasn't expedited because the patient had only been feeling, quote, minor discomfort due to the accident. The doctor who assisted in the surgery said that he was also surprised how someone could swallow a whole toothbrush. The patient was doing well and was also discharged from the hospital. Now, as embarrassing as this is not actually the first time such an incident has happened. Doctors from a southern Chinese hospital only last year removed a 14-centimeter long toothbrush from a man's intestines, which he had swallowed 20 years previous. Which is just bizarre. So this guy swallowed a 14-centimeter long toothbrush. I didn't know they came in that size. And then this was 20 years ago. So then he watched the Twin Towers fall. And then he just decided, I should probably get this checked out by my GP. Sorry, I know I shouldn't bring up 9/11 every time I talk about toothbrushes. I guess it's just a habit at this time. But speaking of New York, the New York town of Swastika recently took a vote to keep its name. So this is a small town, of course, in upstate New York, which is saying that the town founders, the same town founders who named the town Swastika, named it after a Sanskrit word and not after the hate symbol associated with Nazis, and therefore it's moral to keep it. Not just moral, optimal, because they voted to keep it. And it's not like there was a huge debate. In fact, the town board, which has domain over this place, voted unanimously not to change the name. A little bit of history. Swastika was named by the town's original settlers in the 1800s and is based off the Sanskrit word meaning well-being. Now, I find this particularly funny because nobody ever asks what the meaning of a town's name is, right? Nobody goes to Denver and says, what does Denver mean? So the only real reason that it's worth pointing out that this word, the Sanskrit word meaning well-being, actually means well-being, is because about 70 years ago, 85 million people died under the word swastika. Quote, "We regret that individuals that lack the knowledge of the history of our community become offended when they see the name swastika." To the members of our community that the board represents, it is the name that their ancestors chose. And just like that, once again, tradition steamrolls basic courtesy. The vote followed a national reckoning with what the symbol means in modern America. Great, I was wondering how long it would take for this to get political. In April of 2019, a neighborhood in Colorado town outside of Denver voted to change its name from Swastika Acres to Old Cherry Hills. Jesus Christ, that's almost worse. The area had once been home to Denverland Swastika Company, a company that chose its name before Nazis adopted the swastika symbol. Now, the term swastika is derived from the Sanskrit word svastika, which means, quote, good fortune. We already said that. Why is this article repeating it? I don't know. According to the United States Memorial Holocaust Museum, the symbol first appeared about 7,000 years ago and is considered a sacred symbol in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, I'll have to look that one up, and other belief systems, which is why it can sometimes be found on the walls of these temples or even houses. This symbol became popular in Europe in the 19th century and early 20th century, in part as Europeans learned about ancient civilizations through the work of archaeological excavations. The Nazi Party adopted the hooked cross as its symbol in 1920 during the time when other far-right nationalist movements in Europe were beginning to use it, according to the museum. Now, that's the end of that story. I'm sure that this will pick up a lot of attention on social media, and perhaps the town of Swastika will have to reconsider its position on this. Now, I just looked up Jainism, the religion I mentioned earlier, and it turns out that it's a non-theistic religion, which I've never even heard of before, which was created as a reaction against the teaching of Orthodox Buddhism, and is even still practiced in India today. Here's the funny part. It teaches salvation by perfection through successful lives and non-injury to living creatures, and is noted for its aesthetics. So in order to be a religious Jainist, you have to not believe in a god, you have to be perfect, you have to have a successful life, and you cannot, for the love of God, eat burgers. They had me until that last part. I'm gonna have to pass now to probably what is my favorite story of the week, which is that 2 men are hit with felony charges for cheating in a Utah fishing contest after forensic analysis of the winning fish proved that the fish came from another lake. So these 2 fishermen have been convicted. I'm not going to say their names, but it's a 45-year-old and a 35-year-old, and they are being sentenced to 24 months probation, during which they are banned from hunting, due to the scam in which they pretended to catch a huge fish from Lake Powell in order to take home a $2,500 award. Now, what initiated the accusation of them cheating? Well, contest officials spotted some key differences between their fish and the usual fish caught in the lake. You know you fish too much when you... oh lord, when you can realize the subtle differences in fish. After the suspicions, the judges drafted in forensic experts to examine the suspect fish who proved the winning catch was indeed a fraud. The forensic expert couldn't have possibly been cheaper than the $2,500 award, but we'll go on with the story because it gets increasingly ridiculous. The two men participated in a 2-day largemouth bass fishing tournament in Lake Powell in southern Utah, October 2018. Good lord, the story's 2 years old. I like how the details are just getting released now on a fishing scandal. As though it's top secret or something. The contest, which draws competitive anglers to the waters teeming with bass, catfish, and walleye each year, had pulled in around 25 teams, each of which vied to take home the $2,500 prize money. The prize is awarded to the team that catches the 5 fish with the highest total weight. And now, by the end of the day, the cheaters were in second place and had so far earned the prize of the biggest single fish. But it was the contest officials who thought that it seemed a bit fishy, because the bass did not look the same as the other fish it was pitted against. A spokesman for the Utah Wildlife Division of the New York Times said, quote, "1, they were shaped differently, indicating that they probably have a different diet. And then they also had some markers of stress." This begs the question of how much mental clarity it requires to notice that a fish is under stress. I mean, what, did it wake up at 2 p.m. and eat 2 pints of ice cream in order to get over its chest pains? Ridiculous! But apparently the judges knew exactly what they were doing because the officials called a biologist and the Wildlife Resources Division to repair the alleged suspicions, and the investigator questioned the two men on the day of the contest. Quote, "Neither of them were very inclined to talk to our investigator, and one of them started to acknowledge that, yeah, the fish maybe hadn't come from Lake Powell. Then he very quickly asked for an attorney, and then other individuals didn't want to say anything. He asked for his attorney. Did he ask for his phone call too?" The two men had also taken home first, second, and third place from 8 other bass fishing tournaments in earlier 2018. The bass was forensically tested at the University of Utah lab, goodness gracious, to determine where it had originated from. And it was determined in May 2019, like a year later, that researchers revealed it was not possible for it to have come from Lake Powell. This was my new favorite story I've ever done on this show. Investigators later determined that the fish was taken by the culprits from Quail Creek Reservoir about 180 miles west of the lake. And of course, under Utah law, it is illegal to transport live fish to other areas of state without proper clarifications, and it can be a Class A misdemeanor. As a result, in March, the two men were charged with third-degree felony and tampering to influence a federal contest. Why is there a federal fishing contest? This is so ridiculous. Class A misdemeanor of unlawful release of wildlife and Class B misdemeanor were given to the couple as a result of their captivity of a protected wildlife animal. The two men pleaded guilty in August to all 3 counts. Oh my gosh, this is the best story ever. They were sentenced to 24 months prohibition and banned from fishing for 24 months, ordered to complete 48 hours of community service, as well as the embarrassment of having stolen fish on your record. They were also ordered to pay $500 plea and an abeyance fee of $2,500 in restitution to the Wildlife Division's Help Stop Poaching Fund service. And of course, their conviction marks the first time in Utah's history that someone has been prosecuted for cheating in a fishing tournament. The first, but not the last. Wow, that story turned out so well. I was kind of skeptical about it before, but that was just fantastic. Well, you know what's not fantastic? We have to go to a goddamn break right now, so why don't you stay tuned to the next segment where the fantasticness will resume with China's richest person who is claiming bottled water is a private enterprise, making him the first bottled water tycoon. He's the richest man in all of China. And we'll also resume the happy news with a dog who was trapped in a 30-foot hole and who was lured to safety with the brilliant help of beef jerky. We'll get to that and more happy news, and we will start to begin our descent into the depressing news. So stay tuned for all of that.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
The average woman smiles 62 times per day, while the average man only smiles 8 times per day. Which I suppose is conclusive evidence that men have it harder than women. Checkmate, feminists. I'm just kidding, of course. Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where China's new richest person is a bottled water tycoon. The man's name is Zhong Shan, which I did pronounce correctly, who founded Nongfu Spring in 1996. The Billionaires Index now puts Mr. Shan in the top spot of wealth in China with $58.7 billion. Good gravy, that is a lot of water. The recent stock market listings of his bottled water firm and a controlling stake in a vaccine maker have helped boost his fortunes. Due to his cunning business style, he has been named the, quote, lone wolf and is the Asia's second richest person, right behind India's Mukesh Ambani, who is the billionaire behind Reliance Industries. And of course, the funny thing about this entire situation is that most of China's new billionaires come from the tech industry, as they do all around the world. But rising tensions between China and the US over Huawei, TikTok, and WeChat have pushed down valuations of Chinese tech stocks, and as a result, China's food and grocery sector is now vying with its tech industry and producing the country's richest business. The best example of this is the man aforementioned, who, while controlling stake in his new firm, saw an overall wealth jump as much as $20 billion in the month of August alone, which is $666 million per day from selling water. Man, I am in the wrong business. The pharma company says that it partnered with the 2 universities to develop a candidate vaccine to fight COVID-19, so they're putting their money to good use, as well known as also a profitable use. And beyond all that, the online payments firm could net the man an estimated $28 billion on top of what he already has if the company achieves the $250 billion evaluation it has been targeting this year. I find this all incredible and happy because they are providing the public with safe, sanitary bottled water during the time of COVID-19. Pretty cool to see free enterprise gain traction in China. But if you ask me, an even happier story is the dog that was trapped in a 30-foot hole who was lured to safety using beef jerky. I don't want to brag, but the same tactic could have been used on me if I was stuck in a 30-foot hole. A group of mountain bikers on a North Carolina trail spotted a puppy who was trapped 30 feet or 9 meters down in a goddamn sinkhole, and it took a salty snack and some straps to lift him to safety. The group was riding the sinkhole about 50 miles south of Asheville on Sunday when they encountered the dog, who had apparently been stuck in the hole for several days, according to the Burke County Search and Rescue. How the heck would they know? Let me continue beyond my cynicism. The bikers called for help and led rescue more than a mile to the stranded animal, where they rappelled into the sinkhole, enticed the starving dog with some beef jerky, and raised him to safety using a harness and a rescue squad. Best news of all, the dog was not injured, but starving and dehydrated, according to the rescuers, which, if you ask me, qualifies as an injury. He was in perfect health, except for the starvation and dehydration. Anyways, he was taken to the Burke County Animal Services for an examination and named Sinker, after the sinkhole he was found in. Isn't that cute? Named after the tragedy that defines your life. Officials said that the dog did not have a collar or a microchip, and if owners are not found, he will be placed up for adoption. The 7-mile trail is named for the large sinkhole along its ridge in which the dog was found, and now the dog is named after it. You can go online and take a look at some of the pictures of the saving of this animal. It looks to be a mix of like a lab and a German shepherd. Pretty cute stuff. Most importantly of all, it made a moral case for the prominence of beef jerky in society. Time to move on to a more pressing issue as we begin our descent into the sad stories of the week. The MTA Board, or the Metro Transit Authority Board, formally bans defecation in subways and buses. Now, of course, this would probably be under the happy stories of the week, but I put this in the sad stories of the week because, to me, this is the first example of progress in the year 2020, is that we finally said it's not okay to lay human waste upon our public transit. This new rule is on the agenda at an MTA meeting last Wednesday, when the rule will ban defecating on the city's subways, buses, and any other transit facility. The transit rules previously mandated $100 fines for strangers who, quote, create a nuisance, hazard, or unsanitary condition, including but not limited to spitting or urinating. But their new law aims to add defecation to this definition, as it was not previously included. This came after many decades of transit workers griping about, quote, destitute strangers soiling train cars and buses with human waste. This is just the most depressing story ever. On September 7th, a train operator was reportedly, quote, soiled with bodily fluid from a customer at the L Line's 8th Avenue terminal in Manhattan, according to the internal MTA incident report. Quote, the fact that the MTA has to pass a rule against defecating in the subway cars says a lot about the environment we work in down here. Which is, of course, true. It kind of shows that there is just absolutely zero principle to anything they're operating. Because if there was a principle, it would go without saying. And when another train operator was asked about the rule, he said, quote, a rule is nice. A more visible police present on platforms and trains would be even better. Metropolitan Transportation Authority officials in April implemented new emergency rules in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that included the poop ban, as well as bans that barred passengers from taking large shopping carts onto trains and required riders to exit the subway cars at the final stop of each line, making sure that people were not living on the train. However, these rules they put in place were not permanent. They were only 60 days long in authority, but now they are asking the board to vote formally to make the rules permanent. Isn't that beautiful? Alright, let's move on to our next story, which thankfully doesn't have to do with defecation, but does have to do with nudity. The RCMP investigating a man who reportedly hiked nude on Summerland's Full Frontal Trail. If you ask me, they were asking for it. A hiker in Summerland seems to have taken the name of the trail a bit too literally, of course, the Full Frontal Trail. And now the RCMP are investigating a report of the man hiking nude on the Full Frontal Trail of Mount Kunkel. The man reported to the police last Sunday, September 20th, was seen hiking by a group of individuals. As a result, the Summerland Sergeant Dave Preston is requesting anyone with information, including photographs, to come forward. So if you've recently taken photos of a naked man while hiking, don't feel, ashamed about it. Send it to your local police force. Quote, there were several people that were on the trail and they were warned about this individual and suggested to take photographs of him in the hopes to identify him. They're using the Bill Cosby defense. Not okay. Quote, if anybody does have information or photographs in hopes to identify the person, that's what we are looking for. Potential charges the man could face include indecent exposure, amongst other things. I wish I knew what those other things were, but unfortunately that is the end of that story. But don't worry, we have another sexy crime story. An Instagram model who poses as Catwoman was jailed for masked robberies. If you don't know anything about supervillains, Catwoman is a masked robber, which is what makes this so goddamn funny. So this was an Australian Instagram model who would often cosplay as Catwoman, and who has ironically been jailed after being arrested for the second time this year alone for a series of crimes including masked robberies and shoplifting, according to the Australian report. Why would you do that? Robbery seems like such a difficult job to have, whereas Instagram models sound so easy. Maybe she just really wanted to show her true potential. However, the 25-year-old was warned by Magistrate Jacqueline Milledge last year that her life was, quote, going down the toilet, which led the criminal to tell the juror that if she harmed herself in prison, it would be the jurist's fault. What a bunch of goofs. She told Jacqueline that she had, quote, anxiety and depression. Then that's cool. Go ahead and rob other places. And then the judge told her that she could not blame others for her bad decisions. I love this story so much, too. Because I'm such a nerd that I actually imagine Catwoman in front of a jury, still dressed as Catwoman, of course, saying that she has anxiety and depression. And then the judge teaches her about responsibility. The former modeling entrepreneur, real estate agent, and social media influencer, good gravy, why did she become a robber? Anyway, she began her life of crime about 2 years ago when she drove several teenagers to commit burglaries in Sydney, Australia. That is insane. She's like a gang leader. Anyway, she hired this group of boys to wear masks as they chiseled to break open doors to businesses, including a Pound of Pizza restaurant on November 6, 2018, where they were captured on video and subsequently arrested. She tried breaking into a House of Fruit convenience store. She really needs to make better life choices. If you're going to risk your life on robbing a place, why would you risk it on a fruit convenience store? Anyway, she tried to rob this place and reportedly took part in a break-in at Stanley Street Cafe, where $300 and a credit card were swiped, according to the report. $300, and now this is on her record forever. She probably could have made more money Ubering for 2 days. But worst of all, according to the Australian report, was that she used the credit card she stole to buy $11.55 worth of food at McDonald's. About 2 weeks later, she was involved in a raid at the Frostville Bakery, where $1,000 was stolen. She's like a serial robber. You should put her away for a while. She was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison. That is so silly. The article already said that she had been robbing for over 2 years. So now she's going to prison for exactly the same amount of time she had been robbing other individuals in her home country of Australia. What a weak punishment. And not only was those 2 years convicted for her robberies, it was also for carrying a knife at a Target store and possession of crystal meth and stealing $90 jacket at a shopping center. If this was in America, all she would have left in life is a 1 square foot barred window and 1 phone call. She appeared the sentence's severity and was released on bail earlier this year. She didn't even serve the 2 years. But before a court hearing in July, she was stopped by police on an outstanding warrant that she had violated her bail conditions. Come on, I gotta know what she got as a result. Her appeal was later adjourned until August 26th, but when she didn't show up in court, her motion was dismissed, and a warrant was issued for her arrest. She was collared again in September 5th, 2020. Her lawyer who appealed to reinstate the appeal told the judge that her client's offenses have been, quote, amateur hour, and that they were, quote, always going to get caught. Her lawyer's defense was that she was dumb. But apparently the defense itself was smart, as the judge reduced her sentence to a maximum of 12 months, with a 6-month non-parole period, which means that she will be set for release in October, next month. That is so bizarre to me. A serial criminal who is literally ordering other people to commit crimes, and she gets out of prison in half the time it takes to get an associate's degree. Oh well, best of luck to her. I hope she goes down the right path. I hope she learned her lesson in those 12 months of hard time. Alright, stay tuned to the next segment, where we will get to even more depressing stories, including a former commander who avoided jail on illegal weapons charges after a naked shootout. That sounds awesome. And then in the segment after that, we will do my top 10 secret societies. So stay tuned for all of that.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
On average, people spend about 38 days of their life brushing their teeth. So if you ask me, the first trillionaire will be the one who makes it so you don't have to spend any time brushing your teeth at all. Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where we will get into the depressing stories of the week, starting with a former commander who avoided jail on illegal weapons charges after a naked shootout. The former leader of Canberra's Camachero, which was a biker gang, who lost a finger in a fiery shootout at his house, will avoid jail after being found guilty of illegal weapon possessions. So you can go online and watch CCTV footage of the incident, which shows the man, the 38-year-old man, still naked from the shower, firing back at 3 men who were shooting into his house before they poured fuel around his cars and set them on fire. Since then, police have alleged that the fight was prompted by a dispute between rival biker gangs. So many prideful tribes. Days after the firefight, a gun was found in the ceiling of the man's house during a police search, and some bladed knuckle dusters were found in his shed, which is also illegal. And as a result, a jury last week found him guilty of 2 counts of possessing illegal weapons. During sentencing, his lawyer argued for a non-conviction order. He told the court that although the gun was used in the shootout, the man had clearly been acting in self-defense and had not been charged over that. He said the weapon was also well hidden and there was no aggravating features of the crime. It was probably well hidden because it was illegal for him to own it. As for the knuckle dusters, they were said to have been a collector's item, and actually looking at a photo of this, I have to give it to him. It basically looks like Wolverine's claws. I can't imagine anybody would buy those for self-defense purposes. However, the most important part of this man's case is that he left his biker gang. Quote, the offender is no longer associated with the Outlaw Motorcycle Club. The prosecutor, however, pointed out that the man's past offenses are atrocious. Quote, his accedents point towards a non-conviction order being unsuitable. He went on to say that the man had declined offers to help from the police, even on the night he had refused to hand over his gun. As a result, the justice rejected the call for a non-conviction order, but did not send the man to jail, instead suspending his 9-month sentence. As a result, he will have to complete 100 hours of community service and pay more than $2,000 in fines. Not to mention he had one of his fingers blown off in his naked firefight. Which, normally it's bad to have such things on your record, but to fight off multiple gang rivals in a firefight while naked, using an illegal gun and Wolverine claws, and then to be not sent to jail at all, is personally something I wouldn't mind having on my record. But now I'm going to tell you a story about something I definitely would not want to have personal relationships with. In terms of a permanent record, a man steals cat blood from a clinic. In case you couldn't tell, this is my Florida story of the week. A box containing blood vials amounted to $600 lost for the clinic in St. Augustine, Florida. The man was caught on surveillance video footage where he is seen stealing the cat blood from a veterinary clinic in Florida, according to the sheriff's office. The county sheriff posted pictures of the man, which showed him walking out the door of the Anastasia Cat Clinic last September 17th. The man was seen touching and inspecting the diagnostics blood box before leaving the area. Sheriff officials said about 20 minutes later, a truck seen in the parking area and a man wearing the same clothing walked up to the clinic and took the box. The box contained 4 vials of cat blood, according to reports, each worth $150, mounting to a $600 loss for the clinic. So if you know anybody who's recently stole cat blood, why don't you call your local authorities? Now, of course, the strangest question in all of this is, why did the man steal cat blood? It's just kind of odd. He doesn't look like a wizard or something. But I don't think that's likely. What I think is likely is that the man is actually an alchemist, and he's going to set the individuality traits of the cat's blood out from the blood samples and insert it into the voting population, which will inherently change the voting status of Americans in the 2020 election. But I don't want to get political. Next story, a Japanese sex business operator sues state over virus crash. Hand out snubs. I don't know what that means either, but it's fantastic. In Tokyo, a woman running a sex worker distribution business sued the state last Wednesday, saying its blanket exclusion of the sex industry from cash handout programs to support small companies hit by the coronavirus is discrimination banned under the Tokyo Constitution. So basically, she runs a sex industry business, and she did not get a subsidy from the government due to COVID-19, unlike everybody else who did. In the lawsuit filed with the Tokyo District Court, the woman who operates the business in western Japan's Kansai area demanded the payment of the benefits as well as consolation money for having been discriminated against, quote, without reasonable grounds, according to her lawyers. The defendants also include Recruit Company and Deloitte Tamahusto, which is a financial advisory LLC, and these two firms are in fact in charge of the sex work, clerical work for the relief program. Oh, this is so silly. As part of financial assistance to smaller businesses suffering from plunging revenues due to the virus spread, the government provides a maximum $2 million yen in one-off lump sums, which also offers benefits to help them pay rent. The woman's lawyers said that the suspended business suffered between the months of April and May in accordance with business closure requests from the local authorities to contain the virus's spread. And as a result, her business saw its revenue dive 80% in April and 70% in May from year before levels. She is claiming that she was discriminated against when she and other sex business operators met with an official at the Small and Medium Enterprise Agency in June to ask for their companies to be included in the handout program Japan was offering at the time, and the officials rejected their request, saying that such businesses, quote, have previously been excluded from public supports such as ones following natural disasters, as well as that their agency merely, quote, follows the past responses made by the state. As a result, supporters of the plaintiffs say that the government feared possible public backlash in case it provides taxpayers' money to sex business operations, a stance which they will only deepen due to discrimination against the industry and its workers. According to the lawyers, the plaintiff files income tax returns and operates her own business in compliance with laws regulating the sex industry, which therefore entitles her to protection when they shut down her business. The woman told Kyoto News last August that she had decided to go to court over the issue because it, quote, concerns the lives of people who work in her business. The state has yet to provide any convincing explanation for the exclusion. But they did about 2 paragraphs ago, my friend. They justified it by saying it was a tradition of the state, which, to be fair, does not sound like it is a principled defense. Nevertheless, the chief of the team of lawyers defending the lady has said that it is, quote, irrational for the state not to provide benefits to sex industry businesses across the board, including those aiding by the law, calling the state, quote, capitalizing on public discrimination against the industry. And according to the National Police Agency, there were 31,000 sex industry businesses registered with the authorities nationwide as of the end of 2019. And more than 60% of them were sex worker dispatching businesses. And if you read Article 14 of the Japanese Constitution, it provides equality for all, prohibiting discrimination in, quote, political, economic, or social relations because of race, creed, sex, social status, or family origin. This lady's a hero. Real Atticus Finch. Alright, let's move on to our next god-dang tragic story, in which a man dies from eating too much licorice. Now, this comes from a Dr. General report, which says that the death of a local construction worker occurred after the man was eating only black licorice for several weeks on end. The 54-year-old had not previously reported heart problems, despite smoking multiple packs per day. Nevertheless, he went into ventricular fibrillation and collapsed in a fast food restaurant and was brought into the emergency room unconscious. Doctors immediately noted his blood potassium level was dangerously low. They tried increasing it and gave him other medicines to help him, but nothing worked. He had suffered, quote, multi-organ failure. That does not sound like a pleasant way to go. Which, that essentially means that he remained completely unresponsive and died about 32 hours after admission. Very tragic that potassium levels could do that. I wonder how they increase potassium levels in the blood. They just inject a banana into your bloodstream. Nevertheless, quickly after the man's death, doctors began to suspect licorice as the culprit, after ruling out other possible causes of his potassium deficiency, such as the use of digitalis, which I know I pronounced it wrong, but what's more important is what it is. It's a drug which is used for certain heart conditions, which the man had not been taking, even though he was ordered to do so by doctors, due to the fact that he was experiencing various sorts of tumors and extensive vomiting, which he had not taken seriously as a health warning. I so should not be laughing at this. But that does not mean I'm going to stop. When his family was asked about what had caused his death, they said, quote, he had a poor diet consisting primarily of several packages of candy per day. 3 weeks earlier, he had switched the type of candy he was eating, from eating fruit-flavored soft candy to eating licorice-flavored soft candy that contained glyceric acid, which is converted to glycerhenitic acid after it is consumed. Duh. Of course that's what's caused his death. Duh. The acid found in licorice root makes the stuff taste slightly less awful than otherwise would, but it can also cause heart rhythm problems and disrupt a person's body chemistry if consumed to excess, in part by interrupting the body's regulation of potassium levels. But the good news in all of this is that it created awareness. The doctors came out and said that the effects of excessive licorice consumption are not permanent, assuming that it doesn't kill you first. Although it can take a week or two for the body to eliminate the harmful effects of licorice consumption. Told you that was tragic. Alright, I remember I said I was going to get to the mom's remains going missing after being mailed to the wrong Florida address. But unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I'm going to have to save that for my next episode. Stay tuned tomorrow for that. But for now, we're going to go to a break, and in the next segment, I will give you my top 10 secret societies. So stay tuned for that as well.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
% of Americans would rather go grocery shopping than floss. The question, I believe, is more pressing is why the hell did some scientist group get paid to discover the answer to that question? Anyways, we don't have to answer that. What we do have to answer, however, is what are the top 10 secret societies? And as is tradition, I will start with the obvious one. Number 10, the Illuminati, which is said to be a movement of free thinkers that were the most radical offshoot of the Enlightenment, whose followers were given the name Illuminati, but they actually prefer to call themselves perfectibilists. Yeah, I would prefer that title too. They were founded on May 1st, 1776, in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, by the famous Jesuit Adam Weishaupt. And of course, the group is now known as the Bavarian Illuminati. While it is not legally allowed to operate, many influential intellectuals and progressive politicians counted themselves as members. Even though there were not some known Freemasons in the membership, it was not considered to be endorsed by Masonry, which we'll get to the Freemasons later because they're much more interesting. The fact that the Illuminati did not require a belief in a supreme being made them particularly popular amongst atheists in the area, and of course in Bavaria. Theism is not exactly popular. This, and the fact that most members were humanists, is the reason for the widespread belief that the Illuminati wants to overthrow organized religion. This caused internal panic over the succession of a new leader, and government attempts to outlaw the group saw it to collapse entirely in the late 1700s. But this eventually drove conspiracy theorists to argue that the Bavarian Illuminati survived, and possibly to this day, even though there is very little to none evidence that can be found to support the idea that the group survived into the 19th century. It has even been suggested that the Skull and Bones Club is an American branch of the Illuminati, but guess what? We will get to skulls and branches later. In summary, many people believe that the Illuminati is still operating and managing in the main actions of the governments around the world. It is even believed that they wish to create a one-world government based on humanist and atheist principles, but chances are they're not actually around. You'll notice a theme during all of these secret societies, and that's that a lot of the conspiracy theories surrounding them involve an assumption of competence en masse, which is always an indication that whatever you think is happening is not actually happening. Never assume competence in large groups, because usually it just does not exist. Alright, number 9, Opus Dei. Wait, no, that's Latin, so it's Opus Dei, which is an organization of the Catholic Church that emphasizes the Catholic belief that everybody is called to holiness, as well as that ordinary life is a path to sanctity. These are celibate numeraries and numerary assistants which live in special centers, while associates are celibate members living in their private homes. The order was founded in Spain in 1928 by Roman Catholic priest Jose Maria Escavilla with the approval of Pope Pius XII. This group has gained a lot of popularity because of that awful Dan Brown book, The Da Vinci Code, which, after it was published, claimed that Opus Dei was a secret organization within the church whose aim was to defeat the Priory of Sion, which we will get to later, and those who seek to uncover the, quote, truth about Christianity and the alleged royal bloodline of Christ. We should have done this top 10 so long ago. It's great. Outside of this book, however, there have been a great deal of controversy over Opus Dei because of the strictness of its religious structure. The Catholic Church actually forbids secret societies and membership. However, Opus Dei investigators have frequently debunked claims that this organization is acting in secrecy to further a sinister agenda. If you like, you can go online and research it. It's more of a cult than a secret society. It's just very exclusive, which is what makes so many conspiracy theories surround it. Alright, let's move on to number 8. The Priory of Sion, as previously mentioned. That's Sion with an S, not a Z. After the publication of the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, I can't believe I had to mention that twice in one podcast. It's painful. A great deal of interest in the Priory of Sion has been created. Unfortunately for those hoping to find and join the Priory, it is in fact fictional. It was a hoax created in 1956 by a pretender to the French throne, Pierre Plantard. Plantard. There are letters that exist dating from the 1960s written by Plantard, de Chéricy, and Césarée. French is not a pretty language. Anyways, these letters each confirm that the three men were engaging in out-and-out confidence trick, which is like a con trick, describing schemes on how to combat criticisms of their various allegations and how they would make up new allegations to try to keep the whole thing going. Despite this, many people still continue to believe that the Priory exists and functions to this day, and is a large contributor to modern politics. A book written called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail once had its author state, quote, "The Priory of Sion has a long history starting in AD 1099 and had illustrious Grand Masters, including Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci. The other protects Order Royal Clements because they believe them to be the literal descendants of Jesus and his alleged wife Mary Magdalene, or at the very least of King David." The Priory seeks the founding of a, quote, holy empire that would become the next hyperpower and usher in a new world order of peace and prosperity. But we're not after peace and prosperity, which is why we're going to move on to number 7, the Bilderberg Group. Now, this group is slightly different from the others in that it does not have an official membership. It is the name given to a group of highly influential people who meet every year in secrecy and usually with strong military and government-sponsored security. The topics discussed are kept secret during these meetings, and the structure of the meetings that can take place in a conference are usually held in 5-star hotels around the world. Attendance at the meeting is strictly limited by invitation only. The first meeting took place in 1954 at Hotel Bilderberg in the Netherlands. The original meeting was initiated by several people. That is the most meaningless sentence I have ever read. The meeting was initiated by several people. Anyway, the Polish political advisor Józef Rettenierge, concerned about the growth of anti-Americanism in Western Europe, proposed an international conference at which leaders from European countries and the United States would be brought together with the aim of promoting understanding between the cultures of the United States and America and Western Europe. Although the agenda and lists of participants are openly available to the public, it is not clear that such details are disclosed by the group itself. Also, the contents of the meetings are kept secret, and attendees pledged not to divulge what was discussed. The group's stated justification for secrecy is that it enables people to speak freely without a need to clarify exactly how every word might be interpreted by the mass media. Needless to say, the group is consistently surrounded by controversy and conspiracy theories, as are every group on this list. Number 6, and I'm not going to lie, this is my least favorite, the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, which their full name is the United Religious Military and Mosaic Orders of the Temple of St. John of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes, and Malta, is a modern offshoot of the Masonry and does not have direct ties to the original Knights Templar. I warned you this was boring. A religious military group formed in the 12th century. Here we go. Members of the Masonic Knights Templar do not claim a direct connection to the medieval group, but merely a borrowing of ideas and symbols. In order to become a member of this group, you must already be a Christian Master Mason. This organization is a distinct one and is not a higher degree of Masonry, despite Freemasonry's general disclaimer that no Masonic organization claims a direct heritage to the medieval Knights Templar. Certain degrees of orders are obviously patterned after the medieval order. These are best described as, quote, commemorative orders or degrees. Nevertheless, in spite of the fraternity's official disclaimers, some Masons, non-Masons, and even anti-Masons insist that certain Mosaic rites or degrees originally had direct Templar influence. So, in summary, I just told you everything they were not. Because there's absolutely no information on what they actually are. Number 5, the Order Templus Orients. So the OTO is an organization that was originally modeled after Masonry, as many of these secret societies are, and its designation was to take on principles of their own religious system called Thelmia. Thelmia is based around a single law, quote, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under the will. Membership is based upon degrees of initiation, and highly stylized rituals are used, which makes it seem more like a cult. The OTO currently claims over 3,000 members worldwide, and the creator said, quote, I resolve that my ritual should celebrate the sublimity of the operation of universal forces without introducing disputable metaphysical theories. Which is absolutely ridiculous. The basis of metaphysics means that it is not disputable. He goes on to say, quote, I would neither make nor imply any statement about nature which would not be endorsed by the most materialistic man of science. Yeah, he's just babbling clearly. He goes on to say, quote, on the surface this may sound difficult, but in practice I found it perfectly simple to combine the most rigidly rational conceptions of phenomena with the most exalted and enthusiastic celebration of their sublimity. What a jackass. The ritual is very stylized and uses virgin priestesses, children, and priests. Many ancient Egyptian gods are invoked, as well as the devil, and at one point, the priestess performs a naked ritual. Okay, we're starting to see the incentives here, as grotesque as they might be. Let's move on to number 4, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. That's probably my favorite name out of the bunch. The order was created by Dr. William Robert Woodman, who was a Freemason member. That kind of goes without saying at this point. This group is considered by many to be a forerunner of the Ordo Templi Orients and a major modern occult group. The belief system of the Golden Dawn is largely taken from Christian mysticism, which involves Freemasonry, alchemy, and theosophy, as well as magic and Renaissance writings. The fundamental documents of the order are known as the cipher documents. These were translated into English using cipher, which is attributed to Johannes Thromatimus. The documents are a series of 60 folios containing magic rituals. The basic structure of many of these rituals appear to originate with a great deal of controversy which surrounds the origins of these documents. So basically, it's completely forged. Number 3, the Rosicrucians, which are an order which is generally believed to have been the idea of a group of German Protestants in the 1600s when a series of 3 documents were published. The documents were so widely read and influential that the historic Francis Yeats refers to the 17th century as a Rosicrucian Enlightenment. The first document tells a story of a mysterious alchemist who traveled to various parts of the world gathering secret knowledge. The second document tells of a story of a brotherhood of alchemists who were preparing to change the potential and intellectual face of Europe. The third document describes an invitation of Christian Rosicrucians to attend the assist of the chemical wedding of a king and queen in a castle of miracles. This is funny. There is actually a large number of this group today, which each claim to be closely tied to the original group. Of the 2 main divisions, one is a mix of Christianity and Rosicrucian principles, and the other is a semi-Masonic version, of course. Sorry, we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to talk even quicker. Number 2, the Freemasons. I'm not going to put them as number 1 because that would be too obvious. The Grand Mason Lodge was created in 1717. When 4 small groups of lodges joined together, membership levels were initially first and second degree, but in the 1750s, this was expanded to create a third degree, which caused a split in the group. When a person reaches the third degree, they are called a Master Mason. Masons conduct their regular meetings in a ritualized style. This includes many references to architectural symbols such as the compass and the square. They refer to God as the, quote, great architect of the universe. The degree of masonry are 1 entered apprentice, 2 fellow craft, and 3 master mason. But it should be said that some groups have up to 33 degrees of membership, and you can go online and Google local masonry temples. I know there's one in my hometown of Colorado Springs. It's pretty funny. You can just go and join and become a Freemason if you like. It's not too exclusive. But of course, there are many conspiracies, including that they run the world secretly. Number 1, Skull and Bones. We mentioned this formally. The Order of the Skull and Bones is a Yale University society which was originally known as the Brotherhood of Death. It is one of the oldest student societies in the United States, and it was founded in 1832, and membership is open to an elite few. The society uses Masonic-inspired rituals to this day. Good God, the Masons won't go away. Members meet every Thursday and Sunday of each week in a building they call the Tomb, according to the Judy Scheif, chief archivist at Yale University. The names of the members were not kept secret until the 1970s, but the rituals also have been publicized with much scrutiny. Both of the Bush presidents were members of the society while studying at Yale, and a number of other members have gone on to great fame and fortune. The society is surrounded by conspiracy theories, the most popular of which is that probably the idea that CIA was built on members of the group. The CIA released a statement in 2007, coinciding with the popularity of the film The Good Shepherd, in which it denied that the group was an incubator for the CIA. You can read more online if you wish to look it up. But why would you? I just told you everything that you need to know. And nevertheless, I'm going to thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I will also ask that you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and leave us a review and leave a comment. It would be fantastic. Thank you. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.